Every time I've ever listened to you talk about anything on stage, there's always a core value, which is how do we improve the lives of seafarers?
When I was about 12 years old, I joined the Sea Cadets. They said, we don't think that that's something right for you. I don't think you can succeed in doing so. And I was like, all right, literally, hold my beer, I'll show you. I sailed in total for about close to 10 years. You need to be able to have people talk to you. And there's ways of doing so. And I feel that is really important from a leadership perspective. Now it is a different world. It's not about being better or worse. That it's a different world on board with connectivity now. But I feel that you lose a little bit of that social life. If we get to know each other, then I'm going to care more for you and I'll start looking out after your safety just as you would do for mine. But I think what we also have is a shortage of really experienced seafarers.
We need to let seafarers be seafarers. Welcome back to another episode of the Seafarer Social Podcast. Today I'm joined Captain Yves Vandenborn. Captain Yves, you and I have had a bit of a discussion before this. We've seen each other around in certain events, especially Crew Connect Global being one of them. And every time I've ever listened to you talk about anything on stage, there's always a core value, which is how do we improve the lives of seafarers? That's obviously something very close to your heart, having being a captain yourself and being at sea. And some of the work you're now doing to NorthStandard. I want to really dig into that a little bit more. But before we get into any of that, I think it's important to start from the beginning. So the sort of base level question for me is, where did this maritime career start for you?
Oh, that goes back a long time. But Carl, thanks for having me here. Really, really happy that you chose me to have a chat with you. And yes, we have seen each other around the circuit a fair number of times. And I've been looking at the various podcasts you do. So I'm happy that I'm one of your next guests. Where the journey started is an interesting story. And I do not know if it's a real example for students to choose the reason. When I was about 12 years old, I joined the Sea Cadets. So I come from a part of Belgium on the east side where the only water we have is a pool or is a canal. So I didn't really know much about the sea. But I was attracted to water. I joined the Sea Cadets when I was 12. I really enjoyed my time. They're a bit like the Scouts, but the watery versions of Scouts. And I really enjoyed my time. I grew up with them till I was about 17, I think. And then you come to that point in your secondary school where they ask you, what do you want to go and do with your life? And basically I told them, I said, well, I quite like my maths and science, because that's what I was studying at the time. I said, that's one option that I was thinking of, but I've also heard about this option about nautical sciences and to go and become a seafarer. So they said, oh, what's that? We've never heard of this. So I was glad that I was the first student in that school that chose that. So I explained it to them what it was and how it works and how you have to do your cadets and everything. And they said, we don't think that that's something right for you. I don't think you can succeed in doing so. And I was like, all right, literally, hold my beer, I'll show you. And that's more or less what made me decide at the time. I really loved my time with the Sea Cadets. And then I was really happy that I chose this career and that I went to sea.
So there was no previous family that was involved in maritime, no connections internally whatsoever. It was just something that you stumbled across from a passion of being close to the ocean.
Yep, totally. I am the first in my family, and it's something new.
So then let's go to your journey as a cadet to becoming a master. How long was that journey? How many years did that take?
I sailed in total for about close to 10 years. So I have to say it was quite let's call it a quick journey that I had all the way up. And I was from the old style. So I did 3 years in school first. Then I went out to sea for a couple of years, and then I came back for 1 year at the uni, and then to do my master's exams, and then back again to the sea.
And what was the vessel type that you were on?
So I sailed the whole time with Exmar in Belgium. So I started out on a chemical tanker and product tanker for a short while, but then quite quickly moved on to LNG, and I stayed on LPG for the rest of my career.
Nice. One of the things I've seen really consistently is whenever I speak to masters, they always have a specific person during that journey from a leadership perspective that really impacted them individually. Going back to those 10 years that you spent at sea, was there one or a few people that you can remember who really impacted your life as a seafarer?
I think definitely you're right. Everybody will be able to name somebody that has influenced them a lot. At the very beginning, when I was a cadet, there was a second mate at the time that really mentored me. What I afterwards came to understand as what mentoring is supposed to be, though at the time, obviously, we never called it that. And he just took me under his wing, and he taught me a lot about life on board, about things to be mindful of, etc. So I learned a lot from him in that only one contract that I did together with him. Then afterwards, when I came up to chief mate, I was sailing with one of the first female captains in Belgium. And I did quite a number of contracts together with her, and we had a similar, really good working relation, a really good understanding with each other. And I've always appreciated a lot how she guided me on board in everything.
What are some of the key qualities that come to mind about this specific captain that you remember that really stood out?
I think it's very much that being able to listen, very much having that open door policy on board, and the feeling. You need to have that trust feeling on board. You need to be able to be a senior person. Obviously, you're going to make the decisions you have to make, but you need to be open to junior people talking back, and being able to put across that feeling to your juniors. I think that's really important on board. There's been so many examples in when I do crew seminars for the club. I often use one of the examples where the crew was afraid to speak up to the senior master that was on board, where the junior pilot was afraid to speak up to the senior pilot. There were two pilots at the time, and the vessel collided with the terminal at a much too high speed, and I feel that is really important. And from a leadership perspective, you need to have that open door. You need to build that trust. You need to be able to have people talk to you, and there's ways of doing so. You're not going to go and say, "Oh, Captain, I think you are an idiot. This is stupid what you are doing." No, there is a friendly way of escalating your concern. But I think that is an important aspect of leadership.
Yeah, it's so interesting you should say that, because I spoke about a year ago with really prevalent captain at Maersk, Captain Thomas Lindegaard Madsen, who's part of the board of directors and still an active captain as well. And he was telling me about this concept of he does not expect his crew to make that walk to the bridge. There's a little bit of a like an anxiety, taking those steps up. He would meet everybody where they are in the morning and have a cup of coffee, sit down. He'd address them by the name that the mother calls them, as an example, to really sort of break that barrier. And he described it as shooting the ship. We just shoot the ship, have a conversation and really make them feel comfortable, like they're on the same level, instead of expecting them to come to him.
I think that's a really good point, because as a a senior person on board of a ship, you need to come down and look at the ground level. You need to do your rounds on deck instead of asking your chief mate to go and do it and report back. You need to go and have a walk through the engine room and get your hands dirty when required. I think that builds a lot more trust with the crew as well, because they will see, oh, okay, this is a captain that is not afraid of doing something other than just simply staying on the bridge.
So would you say that's the gap then, right? Once you start to elevate to master position, it maybe becomes less about theory and more about leadership. That's really what they're looking for at that point.
I would say so. You need to inspire the crew that you have on board, and obviously there are things as a master that you have to do, and you do them. But it's remaining in touch with the rest of the crew, having that like you say, the daily chat. And I think that's one of the points that tends to be missing these days. When I was at sea, it was a different world. We didn't have internet, so we did have our let's say have a drink prior to dinner every day. And we had a good chat about how was your day, what went well, what went wrong, what can I do tomorrow. And then we had dinner together. And after dinner, we went to watch a movie together, or we did karaoke together. Now it is a different world. It's not about being better or worse. I'm not going to say that. It's a different world on board with connectivity now. But I feel that you lose a little bit of that social life. And I think that's an important aspect that we need to get back. You need to have that social interaction on board with your fellow seafarers. You need to be able to care for each other. If you and I are on board of a ship together, but I never see you except for sometimes I bump into you somewhere, and I don't know anything other than your first name, then I'm not really going to care for your safety. But if we get to know each other, if we hang out, if we watch a movie or sing some karaoke or play a game of ping pong, whatever, and we get to know each other, then I'm going to care more for you, and I'll start looking out after your safety just as you would do for mine.
Yeah, no, I think those points are so valid, and I still see so much value in that face-to-face connection on board a vessel. I think it's imperative. What I would say though is, and this is just sprung to mind, is, I wonder if there is any data out there that has any suggestions of what the typical age range is of a master. Because my theory is, what will happen when Gen Z start to become masters, and they've come from a world where they understand technology, so they understand these issues because they're rooted into how they've grown up, and how they'll apply their understanding of technology and connectivity to managing a vessel from a leadership perspective. It'd be really interesting to see how they change, because I think there are a lot of masters out there, who are very open to it, who are accepting of it, who work around it. There's also some out there that are saying, oh, they're all in their cabins, how do we, they don't want to speak to me, and so on and so forth. So I wonder how the future will look when you start to see this next generation of masters come through.
I think it's a good point. I think we are in a transition phase where let's say those people that have been at sea for a longer period, they knew how it was prior to having internet available on board. And then the new generation that is coming up and that is living with it. But like you say, you have both sides there. You will have people that have been at sea for a very long time who do understand this and who are able to work properly with the new generation. And then you will have some people who are more old-fashioned and who have more difficulty. And again, I think from my perspective, quite often when we have chats internally within the club, it's something that we keep in mind, because all of us in the club, all of us that are ex-seafarers, all of us have been at sea for some time ago that we stopped. And we need to very much keep in mind that life on board is a different ball game now. It's a different situation. And it's not about better or worse. It's just simply different. And we need to adapt to that. And we need to, all the guidance that we provide from the club's perspective needs to have in mind how things are on board these days.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think one of the things I've learned is that nowadays people my age, I'm almost 30 years old, but people my age and younger, unlike previous generations where 100% of your relationships would be focused on face-to-face communication, it's almost slightly split now. 50% of our relationships are digital and 50% of our relationships are face-to-face, right? Even working from home nowadays, sometimes people just are on Slack. They don't see each other face-to-face, and they rely on creating digital relationships just as much as face-to-face. So I wonder if there's a world where future leaders future masters, will be able to, I know it's strange because they're on the same vessel, but try and mix in a way of having a technological relationship with their crew as well as a physical relationship with their crew. I wonder if there'd be value in that.
I'll probably be a little bit old-fashioned on this one, because I feel that it's important to have that human-to-human interface. Yes, there is a lot that you can do over a chat with each other, and you have a group chat and you can keep in touch. That's all fine. That's possible, but being able to see how a person looks like. I think there are issues happening on board of ships where people are getting depressed, where people are unfortunately considering self-harm. And if you have a personal, a physical connection with those people, you can spot the challenge. You can see it, and in a message that doesn't come across. So I think that's an important aspect of why being social on boards is still important, because quite often the only thing that those people need, or a big point that those people need, is the ability to be able to talk. Have somebody come to them and say, "Hey, are you okay? What happened? Talk to me."
Yeah.
And just totally spot the problem.
I totally agree. It's a really hard thing to find a balance. It's really difficult. It'll take people, of innovation and understanding at a very high level to be able to master it, but it's very difficult to get that balance. So that was your 10 years at sea. And then I think when we did our brief the other week, you said that you've now been in Singapore, I think you said for 26 years, am I right?
Yeah, I landed here in Singapore, 26 years ago.
Yeah. So let's talk about that transition, because I think for a lot of seafarers, in the back of their mind, there'll always be not for everybody, but for some, there'll be a plan of transition. Okay, now I maybe want to have a family, or now I want to maybe explore new opportunities, or so on and so forth. And then they go from having a career that not many human beings understand on this planet, to be completely frank, to now trying to join the general public in an office job, or so on and so forth. How was that transition for you?
I think it's a difficult decision that you need to make when you are at sea. And that point will come for a lot of seafarers. And I think there it's important to try and find out what it is that you really want out of a short career. What I feel is that a lot of seafarers, they do not really understand the options that are available to them. They, for example, do not know, I can go and work in a P&I club. I can go and work in a law firm as an admiralty lawyer. I can go and become a ship manager. There's so many options that are available to seafarers that I feel they are not always aware of. So what I think is important there is that they get that understanding, and that they have that they start talking with people during their holidays. Okay, I know when you're on a holiday, you probably want to do different things than go and talk to maritime people. But I feel it is of benefit. You need to build up that network of people on the shore side, and you need to find out what is an option to you. What is it that you would like to do when you come ashore? And actually, sometimes there are companies that will allow you to go and work in the office for one contract. So instead of going out for a contract at sea, you go and work in the office and you shadow one of the superintendents, whether it's marine or technical. You get to understand better what it is that they are doing, which frankly, when you are on board, you often miss that understanding. Because when you are on board of the ship, you see everything from a ship's perspective. You do not have the bigger picture of what is happening. And going on to the shore side and working with the superintendents there, or with a marine manager there, you get to see a little bit the bigger picture. And then you say, oh, okay, now I understand why he's asking me to do this on board of the ships. So that is one benefit of doing a contract on the shore side. But at the same time, also it allows the seafarer to see the various options that are available to them for when they want to make a decision. Now, for me personally, once I reach that top level, you know that you can't get any further at sea. And you know also that the longer that you wait before you are going ashore, the harder it becomes to adjust. So in a way, and one of the most difficult things for me to adjust when I stopped sailing was you were in charge on board. And you're suddenly almost nobody when you are ashore. And you start out I started as a marine superintendent when I came ashore. And I found out that I literally knew nothing, even though I had been master on board. So that is a difficult step. But you need to get through that if you want to then build up your career on the shore side again. So you need to find that right time for you. Very often the family comes in there as well, because by that time you might have a little one running around, and you might want to be able to spend more time with the family. So that's of course always a factor. But I think it is important for seafarers that they try and build up that network when they are still sailing, so that they get an understanding of their options when they stop sailing.
Yeah, I totally agree. But one thing, just a caveat off the back of that, one thing I've heard from many seafarers is this assumption that they will not be employable if they don't have their master's license. And what would you say to that? Is it 100% necessary to become a master in order to become employable ashore, or is it possible to do it earlier?
It's a difficult one, and I think it really depends on the type of job that you are looking for. On the shore side, to be honest, from our P&I perspective, if we look at the various people we employ on the loss prevention side, all of us have senior experience on board. It doesn't, not necessarily as master, but definitely as chief officer or second engineer, chief engineer. So I think it really does give you a different perspective to have that senior position. If you choose to go ashore at second mate level or third engineer, second engineer level, I think your options are limited. So I would encourage for those who can to really try and get to that senior level before stopping, because once you stop, it becomes really difficult to go back.
Yeah, it makes total sense. And you mentioned there some of the options that seafarers might not even know that they have access to. P&I clubs, law firms, and so on and so forth. From your experience now being ashore for 26 years, what are some of the most successful transitions that you've seen with fellow seafarers become in the shore world? Have you seen C-suite level seafarers, for example? Is that something that exists?
Definitely, absolutely. There are quite a lot of our members that we insure where there are seafarers at very senior levels within the company. I think that's definitely an option. It depends on the type of company, but yes, I think definitely you can go very far. Look at other people like Cuba, for example, as Secretary General of Intermanager, or when you move on through the ICS, the Chamber of Shipping, there are a lot of senior people there who have seagoing experience. Intercargo, Intertanko, similarly. So yes, I think definitely there are a lot of options for seafarers to go very high.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we really need to emphasize that, because I think there are too many seafarers out there that sandbox themselves sometimes and think that actually it's impossible for me to do anything else. This is all I know. But actually, there's a very specific set of skills that I think seafarers acquire that actually the average human being will never be able to acquire, because they can't experience what they've experienced. So 10 years at sea and 26 years working ashore. How long have you been at NorthStandard?
16 now, yes. 16 years with the club.
Okay, cool. So from your perspective then, because you have, two lenses here, you've seen the industry through an operational perspective and a loss prevention perspective. My question to you are, what are the most common challenges that you see affecting crew well-being at sea today?
In a way, probably I will say the connectivity on board can be a challenge. And we already discussed the social aspect of it. That's definitely one of the challenges, because by having that connectivity, obviously you are close to your family. That's a nice thing. You are able to call home, see your little baby on a video call. Those are the good points. At the same time, the risk is there that the problems from the family are coming on board of the ship. Yeah. And it becomes very difficult then for you as a seafarer when you are on the other side of the world with 12-hour time difference to be able to deal with those problems that are on the family side. And I'm definitely not saying that we should not allow those problems to go. You need to be able to keep in touch with your family, but there needs to be different ways that you can deal with those problems. A lot of the companies these days, certainly the bigger ones, the better ones, they're setting up family support services. So the families on the shore side, they can go to the company, they have a special network there, and they can seek, let's call it first aid, not medical first aid, but it can be financial first aid. It can be technical issues at home where they need advice on something that needs to get fixed. So there is a support network for the families on the shore side, so they don't necessarily need to trouble their partner at sea with that problem. So I think the connectivity is one issue, but at the same time, look at it from a company perspective. Because of the connectivity these days, I feel that also there is a lot more paperwork that gets pushed to the ships. And sometimes some companies are really good in it, and they have shore staff who are aware of how life at sea is. But sometimes we come across superintendents or operators, ship operators on the commercial side, and who do not really have an understanding of what life on board is. And they say, the agent sent a message that the ship has left port. Let's say they're leaving somewhere on the Mississippi and they're sailing out, and they start chasing the ship. Where is your departure message? What are your fuels? What's your ETA? While the captain is busy with the pilot trying to navigate a dangerous river passage. So I think sometimes that understanding or lack of understanding, let's call it, is creating stress on board for the seafarers. So having that better understanding would really help. I mentioned the paperwork part. I also feel sometimes things are being pushed to the ship. Captain, can you fill in this questionnaire? Captain, can you fill in this Q88, whichever one it is? Fine, but you can fill it in on the shore side. Why do you need the ship to fill it in? You have all the details on the shore side. So again, it's that understanding that the shore side does not always have of life on board of a ship. So I think that is an important one that I think is affecting well-being. Shore leave is one that we see. You know that from NorthStandard, we sponsor the Seafarer Happiness Index. We've been sponsoring it for 5 years. We are really proud of actually what the Happiness Index does. And time again, out of that survey, we see that shore leave is an issue. And it's a bit also as a result of modern days. Ships are not staying in port as long as they used to. For example, when I was at sea, we might stay longer those days. You might be further away from the city. There might not be a transport available to go from the terminal all the way to the city. It might be that following COVID, not all the countries have opened up shore leave again to seafarers. So that is an issue. So I think shore leave is a problem. And I don't necessarily think that seafarers want to go to the city. I think they just want to be able to get off the ship for a while, go maybe to a charity center that is nearby the terminal, and just have a different view, eat something else. It doesn't need to be a shopping. Of course, some people would like it. So I think shore leave is another issue these days. But I know that the Mission to Seafarers is running a project that is looking at shore leave and what facilities are available to seafarers. So I hope that is something that soon more information will become available on.
But a very difficult challenge to really conquer, because from all the research I've done, the only real solution appears to be more investment, and that's always difficult to ask for, right? But yeah, I do think the shore leave is a huge issue. One of the other things that came out that was quite alarming from the ITF back in January is the seafarer abandonment is at an all-time high and has been getting higher and higher over the last few years. That's a really, horrible situation. I don't think it gets much worse than that. Do you have any data from the club's perspective of where this has been going, or an opinion?
It's going up. I've read that same ITF report, and there've been a number of workshops around it, also organized by the mission and by other industry bodies. It's definitely a big concern, and what the worst part of it is, quite often the seafarer is not properly aware of what is awaiting them. These abandonments, they often happen on what we call the parallel fleet or the shadow fleet, regardless of which name you want to call it. And seafarers might not necessarily know that they're heading for a ship like that. And then when by the time that they get on board and they find out that it is one of the shadow tankers, and then they might just get abandoned. It's really sad. If it happens under any of the IG clubs, if it happens under any of the MLC covered vessels, there is an obligation for the club to step in. But honestly, from our perspective, we sometimes see notifications for abandonment, but they tend to get resolved before we need to step in. So those cases that ITF is reporting on, I think they are happening on really on the shadow fleet.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, and that sort of leads me into my next point. I was speaking to somebody in the industry, and he said to me, 30% of the shipping companies are perfect, squeaky clean. They operate great. They really care about their crew. 50% are, a little bit in the yellow zone. Could be better, not so bad. They're interested in getting better and getting into that 30%. And then the 20%, they'll always be bad. There's nothing you can do about it. We have to try and figure out as an industry how we get that 50% into that 30%, which I thought was quite a nice analysis. But one of the things I want to talk about, the shadow fleet, we hear a lot about seafarer shortages. We hear a lot about how there's not enough seafarers. From my experience living in the Philippines and going places like India and so on and so forth, it's the opposite. There's actually an influx of seafarers who are desperate to get on board. And I guess that desperation leads to any opportunity will do, right? So they could find themselves on part of the shadow fleet because they're so desperate to just get a job, right? So that's another problem I think we got to face as an industry is how do we give more seafarers opportunity?
I think it's a really valid point. And I know for the Philippines, there are a lot of Filipinos who are going through the academies and who graduate and who are unable to find a ship, who are not able to get their sea time in. And that's really sad because I think in the long run, we will have a shortage of seafarers. But I think what we also have is a shortage of really experienced seafarers. I think that is an issue. And certainly now also with alternative fuels that are coming in, we need even more training. We need to get a lot of seafarers through the training to be able to deal with all the alternative fuel issues. That is going to be an issue to get that done in time before the fuels are actually being used. But I also think from an industry, we have a fairly negative opinion. I think the wider world views or does not really know what shipping is. And in a sense, they only see shipping when there is a big pollution, when a bridge collapses, when there is a big collision, when there is a fire, or when the crew gets locked up in a port. And I think there is a negative impression there, which I fear is holding people back from other countries to go to sea. And I think it's not as if we cannot talk about the problems. We do have to talk about problems that we have on board of ships. And there are issues related to well-being and shore leave and everything that we discuss. But at the same time, life at sea is a really good job. And it's really satisfying to be at sea and to have that as a career. So I think the image that shipping has is something that needs to improve towards the wider world. Another issue that we are having is retention of people. Seafarers that do find a bunk on board, that go through their sea time, they quite often don't stay until a senior rank. They will go ashore and stop sailing for a variety of reasons. It might be family related, but it might also be well-being related. Or they might have had the wrong expectation of what life on board was going to be. So I think image, yes, being more open with cadets before they go to sea about what it is that they need to expect, how life on board is, what are the cultural differences and aspects that they need to keep in mind. I think all of that is important.
And where do you see the industry heading in terms of the future of new labor markets? You know, we hear that, you know, the Philippines, China, there's different data that suggests both are still the dominant labor markets. But for international waters, definitely the Philippines. Then we have India growing as well. Indonesia. We hear a lot of conversation around Africa as a big labor market for the future. Even some South Americans. I was speaking to Tommy Olofsson recently, and he was saying there's a lot of investment they have into South America. Where do you sort of see the industry heading in 5-10 years' time when we look at the labor markets? Do you think the Philippines will still be the sort of standard, or do you think you could see a potential change?
I think the risk of change is always there. Look at the West European seafarers.
Yeah.
It's a dying breed, to be honest. Yes, of course, there still are, but it's a lot fewer. Why is that? We've become too expensive to be at sea. That's plain and simple. So that is a risk that always may happen to other nationalities. I do not immediately think that the Philippines or India is going to price themselves out of the market. But ship owners are always going to try and look at new markets. Myanmar is coming up. Vietnam is coming up. And like you say, South America, South Africa, a lot of investment is being put into those countries to try and explore new nationalities. But I think finding people a bunk, there is plenty of people available. Find them a ship, get them their sea time. I think there is plenty available.
Yeah, I totally agree. So to finish up, my final question for you, and thank you, by the way, for giving me some of your time. This has been really insightful. My final question to you is, if you were sat in a room of ship operators, owners, seafarers, what would you say is a number one piece of low cost advice? Because I think it's always important that we know cost is an important factor in all of this. Low cost advice of how we as an industry can improve seafarer well-being. How do we increase that trajectory on the happiness index, where seafarers, generally speaking, are much happier in their jobs? What is a simple piece of advice that you would give, having been a seafarer for 10 years of your life and now working ashore?
I think it's always a difficult one, because quite often the whatever suggestions are being made to improve the well-being on board of your seafarers, they can be suggestions like, oh, you got to put one extra guy on board, have an extra person on board. That'll help a lot with workload, etc. But of course, that comes at a cost. I think something that can cost a lot less. Make sure that you have a proper culture on board. Make sure that it's not just about the safety culture. Obviously, that's important, but it's about that social culture, social cohesion on board. And there are simple ways that you can implement that. You can put simple equipment on board that allows them to have social gatherings. You can give them time to time something different to cook so that they can actually enjoy having a meal together instead of always eating the same things. You can have social ambassadors on board. That's quite recently, ISWAN published their Social Interaction Matters report. They did phase 3, and there are it's a really interesting report, and there's a lot of recommendations that came out of it on that actually are easy to implement and that would really improve the well-being. So I'll do a little shout out to ISWAN here for the work that they are doing on social life on board. I think that's important. Other simple things is what we talked about earlier, the shore side. To have them, to get them a better understanding of what life on board is so that they can be a bit more mindful. That's a small thing, but it'll be appreciated on board by the crew. And get that cadet training and make sure that cadets are properly equipped to go on board, that they understand how life is going to be for them and that they are prepared for it. And of course, there's a lot of things that we haven't discussed about harassment and bullying, and those are issues that are an issue that needs to get addressed on board. Companies do need to have that policy and procedures in place for that, because you cannot accept that.
No, of course. And I think, updates in the STCW, which came from the 1st of January, the IMO pushing a lot more training around bullying and harassment now. I think that training is an element, but it's not everything. I think a large part of it would be based around, as you said, culture, leadership, and so on and so forth. But one last thing that I really want to emphasize, and you spoke about it earlier on, the pressure that seafarers have of paperwork and so on and so forth. One of my guests said something to me, and I think is really prevalent. He said, we need to let seafarers be seafarers. We need to let seafarers be seafarers and put more autonomy in the seafarer themselves and trust that they can make the right decisions based on for the vessel. So I think that's another interesting angle as well. Captain Yves, thank you so much for your time. It's been great speaking to you. You're somebody that I admire very highly. Every time I hear you speak with authority and experience. And, for somebody like myself who hasn't been to sea, it's really interesting and insightful to listen to somebody like yourself who has. So thank you so much for giving me your time. And I hope we can do this again, maybe face to face.
That would be great. And I know we'll see each other in Singapore soon. So thanks very much for having me, and really nice to chat.
Awesome. I'll see you in April.